In this short video, I want to show you what I do the night before a bike event to get the bike ready. Now, most of the things that I'll show in this video are pretty basic, but they're important because if it's a bike event, you've probably paid money to enter and you're probably driving a distance to get to it. Probably the most important is taking care of your tires, and that involves making sure you have enough tire sealant and then making sure you have enough pressure in the tires. Now, I highly recommend doing this the night before versus the morning of your event, simply because there have been a few times where the valve stem, when I tighten it back up, was not tight enough. Now, I'll say that with Stan's valve stems, I don't typically have that problem. Almost every other manufacturer, I have to get the valve stem, the Presta valve, really tight, and it can leak overnight. Then I'm nervous during the event thinking it may happen again. So I like to do it the night before, make sure that Presta valve is tight, and hopefully in the morning it's okay. If it's not, then I top it off, and then I'll probably check it when I get to the event. So first thing that we'll do is make sure we have enough tire sealant. One thing that I'll do is I'll break the bead, pull one bead off the rim and look inside and make sure I have enough sealant. I'll do that for one tire. The other tire, I'm gonna do something I haven't done before, and it's a pretty cool little device that is a funnel that I can put on the valve stem, but I wanna show you both ways. Whatever method I use, I do have to let the air out of the tire. So I've got one bead off. You only have to do one side. Then I just like to look inside and make sure I got enough sealant. I actually have a lot left in this one. I had an event about 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I always like to check. You know, I'm driving an hour and a half for this event. So this tire is good. For the front tire, I'll show you another method that's a lot quicker. Now, the method that I'll show you for the front tire is a lot quicker and a lot less messy. The only downside is you may risk putting a little bit too much sealant in, but better a little bit too much than not enough. So I'll let the air out, remove the valve core, and then we'll thread on this little funnel. It's made by Straz Components. I'll put a link in the description below. And I like this better than the injectors because the injectors can also be messy. This is not messy. So I'll just pour, I'm gonna do a little less than a cup of Stan sealant, and I'll just pour it in there. And just put the valve stem back in and air up your tires. And then I always like to use a digital tire gauge, especially for an event. I want my pressures exact. So I always go 1 PSI higher than I normally run the night before an event. I don't want to touch the valve stem in the morning. So I normally run 19 in the front, 21 in the back. So I'm going to go 20 and then 22 in the back. And make sure your valve stem is tight. Next, I make sure my chain is clean and lubed. If your bike is really nasty and it's been a while since your drivetrain has been cleaned, you may want to do a full bike clean. This chain is not too bad, so I'm just going to spray some degreaser on a rag or paper towel and just wipe it down. And then lube the chain. If you want to drip on every single link, one by one, go for it. I got to be somewhere soon, so this is how I normally lube my chain. Whatever works for you. Then I'll let it settle in overnight, and then in the morning, I'll wipe it off. If you have electronic shifting, make sure your batteries are charged. That goes without saying. So rear derailleur, you could just pull the battery off and go charge it. I just fire up the app on my phone because I also want to check the shifter. I've had a couple rides where the shifter battery was going bad. It wasn't for an event, but I always like to check. So this app shows that shifter and rear derailleur battery are great. So we're good there. Now it actually shows that I'm due for a firmware upgrade on my components, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that actually. The next thing that I'll do is make sure my Garmin has enough battery. I will typically use my Edge 840 for a mountain bike event. Sometimes I'll use my watch, and then if it's a gravel event, I'll use the Edge 1050. I make sure my Garmins have at least 60% battery. The watch, I'm good with 50%. So this one looks like it's at 75, so we're good there. And then I like to check a few key bolts on the bike. For example, suspension pivot bolts and saddle bolts. One time in a race, I had my saddle come loose and fall off, and my race was over, and I was actually doing really well. And so, you know, after something like that happens, you like to check bolts. So also water bottle bolts. These actually come loose more often than any other bolt. Not very often, but more often than other bolts. So check your water bottle bolts. Also, you may want to check your pedals just to make sure those are tight. And then the last thing that I like to do is just check the sag on my suspension, just to make sure there hasn't been any kind of air leakage, especially if it's been a while since I've done it. So what I'll do is I'll slide up the O-ring, I'll get on the bike gently, and then I'll check the sag. Now, I write down my sag numbers. So I know what the sag percentage should be and what the air pressure should be. So you can do it both ways. Like you could just know what your air pressures are, and if your weight hasn't changed anytime soon, you can just check the pressures in your suspension, or you can just sit on the bike like this and measure the sag on your O-rings. That's all I'll say for that. I'll link in the description below my suspension tuning video if you are interested in watching that. But again, just check the sag based on the recommendation of the bike manufacturer. So that's how I prep my bike the night before an event. If there's anything that you do that I did not show in this video, let us know in the comments. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and drop those below. If you want to see the video that I made on how to tune your suspension, click right here. And then if you want to see the video that I made on how to clean and detail a bike, I'll put that link in the description below. Catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.